Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Facebook Live. As you know, Adrian Warnock is on my page, so I'm guessing you're seeing it there. And this is the first time I've actually done a Facebook Live since January, believe it or not. I don't know how it's been for you, but the year has sure gone fast for me. So here I am, and you can see a bit of my garden in the background there. I'm sitting in my conservatory, so it might be a little bit echoey. And it's actually 6 months exactly today that I had my last dose of chemotherapy. So that day I would have gone up to the hospital, had an infusion, and then come home. And obviously, well, you know, those who've been through that will know a bit about what that's like. But 6 months on, it's kind of a critical moment. And in fact, this week I will go back and see the doctors. But I've had a number of blood tests in the last 6 months. And they've all suggested, praise God, that the numbers are really good. So I just really wanted today to mark this 6 month sort of anniversary, if you like, much like they did in the Old Testament. You may remember there's a few times in the Old Testament where they put stones down, and obviously I'm not going to put physical stones down, but this is like a marker point for me. Here we are, 6 months on from chemo. We're about to enter the new term, and yes, the beard has gone. The beard has gone, and this is significant for me. I've been told that I look younger and I look healthier, and I certainly feel healthier. So again, I'm very grateful to God. So it says of Samuel that at one point in 1 Samuel 7:12, he put a stone and he called it Ebenezer. And what he said is, up until now, the Lord has helped us. And I think it's important sometimes to just take stock and to say that. And I've had a journey. I'm not going to pretend that this journey has been a smooth one. It's well, it's 2.5 years more or less now. May, June, July, August. Yes, well, next month or so, it'll come to 2.5 years since I was first taken ill. And yes, you don't go through a journey like that without some spiritual bumps along the road, without some relational bumps along the road. In fact, that's probably a little bit of a understatement. It's probably fairer to say it's been like a tsunami has hit my life and wreaked destruction. I mean, at one point, I think I was wondering what would be left almost. And at times, it's been really, really tough. And I found a particular book very helpful, and that's a book by Tim Keller. And I may well post a little bit about this book on my blog over the next little while. A book by Tim Keller called Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. And there's many, many good things that I've learned through that book. And it's taken me months and months to read it. But I think it's very, very helpful. And one of the things it talks about there is a journey. So my journey up until this point has not been easy at times, but God has been faithful. And there are many ways that I want to thank God. I want to thank God, first of all, for the NHS. They've saved my life on more than one occasion. They've provided medication for me, which has reversed the blood cancer. And right now, as far as I'm aware, the blood results up until now have all been pretty good, really. My lymphocytes, which were high, are now very low, which is what you want. And also the lymph nodes, which were all swollen, they've all melted away, and the spleen has shrunk as well. So I've been told that the CT was essentially normal, so that's something to be fantastically pleased about. The blood is considered to be in remission, and they went a bit further than that. They looked at a bone marrow sample, and the assumption is that before I was treated, the bone marrow would have been full of cancer cells, or almost full of cancer cells, and they looked at 2 million of those cells, and they could only find 4 cells that had some kind of warning signal that they may have been cancerous. So 4 out of 2 million is pretty good. So it's less than 1 in 100,000. So from a medical point of view, what I've been told is that I have a very good chance that I'll have a number of years before I need any more treatment. I have been told that you can't really cure this, medically speaking. There are a few people who do really well and can go a lot longer than that. But, you know, from a medical scientific perspective, we'd be looking at a few years. So, you know, this is, again, something to be very grateful to God for. There were some markers that suggested chemo might not have actually worked with me. So praise God that it worked. So I'm very grateful to all your prayers. And obviously, I did get quite unwell. And some of you will have noticed that just from the fact that I wasn't blogging much. Well, I blogged last night. This will go on the blog today, and I'm going to try and reboot the blog. So if you enjoyed my blogging, then pop over there. And obviously, as I say, I think I'm going to blog a bit about the Tim Keller book and what I've learned through that. But the book's title is quite important in and of itself, and that is the fact that it's a journey, and that means sometimes it's a struggle, and that means you've got to take the long-term view. You can't be too worried about the step in front of you. You know, if any of you have been on a long walk, there comes a point in any long walk where you want to give up. And the only way to keep going is two things, really. One is to have the goal of the future in mind, to have hope. And I intend probably to blog about hope a bit, because certainly that was one of the things that Keller talks about in his book, that really, for a Christian, hope makes all the difference. And, you know, it's a funny old thing, because, of course, the next thing is to have some sort of focus on the next step. And that's where it can be tough when you're sick, because, you know, at one point I was lying in a hospital bed needing full nursing care, pretty much. And so obviously, you know, you can feel quite low at that point. And it is quite a hard battle to fight back, but I am fighting back. And so that's another thing that I'm very grateful to God for, is that I'm so much better. I've just spent some time in Devon with the family, and whilst I couldn't go on long walks at all, I could certainly do much more than I could a year ago before the chemo started. And so the recovery, although still slow and punctuated at times by infections, because my immunity is still not great, I'm actually doing a much better. You can probably tell, actually, my thoughts are a little bit clearer, at least right now. I mean, it's obviously, I get tired a lot. But here it is, it's in the afternoon on a Sunday. I've been to church, enjoyed service this morning, and I'm not yet feeling exhausted, and I can think clearly. So that's great, but of course, if you want to carry on praying for me, that would be one thing to pray for, really, that my energy levels would continue to improve, and that this would start to sort of click into action a little bit. I do feel, as I say, much better than I was. I'm not going to sort of pretend that I'm fine, and I'm still off work sick. And so, yeah, the body is sort of gradually being healed. And that is sometimes a slow process. Obviously, God can accelerate that, and it'd be great to pray for that. But also, I suppose for me, I need to have that patience and to keep at it sort of one step at a time. And really, as I say, on a journey, you look at the goal and you're aiming towards that goal, but you also look at the next step and you take one step at a time. And so for me, that means one day at a time. And if I do allow myself to think too far ahead, and particularly with whole things like, oh, you know, am I going to be able to get back to work? All of those kinds of things, that can be a bit more difficult. So for me, it's trying to keep focused on what's in front of me. And also the realization that hope is not just for now. And again, that was something that came out in Keller's book. Keller, I suppose the two main things, and there's more, a lot more actually, but two of the main things that came out to me in that book were the fact that Christianity tells us two things that's really important, that actually in a way no other faith and no other philosophy does. And the first is that, you know, if you and I are facing some kind of suffering or difficulty, that actually the world isn't as it's supposed to be. The world sucks. The world's a mess. It was good when God first made it, but we made it bad. And because of the fall, because of the activity of man in committing sin, and just because of the way in which the whole creation has as a result of that fallen, you know, bad things happen, and bad things happen to good people, and bad things certainly happen to people like you and me, who are perhaps just average people, or even below average perhaps in some cases. And I certainly feel that way for myself. You know, you can start to think, oh, was it my fault? What about this sin? What about that? What about the next? And, you know, of course, you know, God doesn't punish people, because as Christians, you know, He's full of grace to us. And I'm so grateful for the grace of God. I've had to realise that it's not about me sort of proving myself to Him. It's not about me proving myself to anyone else. There's, you know, been many times when I've been frustrated because I wanted to be able to do something, wanted to be able to make a difference, wanted to be able to change things. But one of the things I've realised, you know, really quite recently in a way is, look, I'm not God. He's God and I'm not. And that's quite liberating, actually. The world is a mess, so it's no surprise in that sense that I should face what I've faced. And actually, many people have faced much worse than me. You know, I've been so blessed because, you know, I've had good healthcare, by and large, and certainly, you know, in terms of the world, excellent healthcare, and, you know, good care from people, good treatment. free treatment. I mean, many of you who are my friends on Facebook are in countries where you don't get free healthcare, and you worry about becoming bankrupt through situations like this. And again, of course, and another thing I'm painfully aware of, which is something I hadn't really quite thought about before this happened to me, is what happens if you can't work. So for many people, if they get an illness like I've had, and they're just not able to work, well, bankruptcy is what happens, because maybe you get 6 months. I mean, interestingly for me, this is again the sovereignty of God in this. I left a job and joined a new job just months before I was taken ill, and because I joined the new job, I joined an insurance-backed scheme that has guaranteed at least a proportion of my income, even all these months that I've been off. It's now well over a year that I've been off. Probably, I think it's about 18 months actually, something like that. And so, without that, if I'd have been in the previous job, I'd have had 6 months pay, 6 months sick pay, and then once that had run out, that would have been it. And so quite how my family would have survived financially, I have no idea. So, God, I don't believe God is the author of these things, but God is sovereign over them. And I think God sort of held it back until that moment where I was in a safe place, if you like, where I would be looked after financially. And whilst it's been tough at times financially, we are blessed, and God has been good to us, and God has been good to the family. There have been times when, I'll be honest, I've doubted some of that goodness, and it's been difficult, and I've not reacted as I should. I think sometimes people, watch a video like this and say, "Oh, Adrian, you're so strong." Well, I can tell you, I don't feel strong. There have been many times where I felt very weak, many times where I've really struggled. But there's something in that struggle. You see, what Tim Keller said was, look, the Bible and the gospel kind of gives us permission to be upset at the state of the world, to realise that it's not how it should be, that this is not how God originally intended it, that things happen that do suck. Jesus himself said, look, in this world you will have troubles. Don't be surprised, you will have troubles. But he also says, take heart, I've overcome the world. And so that's the second thing. It's like, don't be surprised at the troubles, realise that the world is a mess, understand that, but understand also that there is hope, because there is somebody above it all. There's somebody who's turning all things around for the good, even small things like changing jobs at just the right time, so that actually it's not a small thing, it's a huge thing, so that we can be blessed, compared to some people who might even be watching this, who are struggling financially because of a health problem that stops them being able to work. So we've been really, really blessed. And there's the journey. We all have a journey, and as I say earlier, this is me wanting to say, look, I'm putting a stone in the ground with this video. I'm saying, look, I'm grateful to God. He's helped me. Yes, there's been detours along the way. And I guess, I'm sorry I hadn't updated you for a while. I guess I was kind of waiting for the destination. But short of a miracle, there is no kind of destination. As I say, I'm still struggling with infections. I'm still struggling with really very low energy, but it's much better than it was, and it's improving. Recovery is not easy. I think we don't realise when our body goes through all of this, and it's kind of gone through a lot of trauma. I've been in hospital several times. I've had operations. I've had chemotherapy. And, if every drop of your body of your blood is not working properly, as it wasn't, then is it a great surprise that the rest of you doesn't feel great? And as I say, my immunity is still not sort of apart. And so, lots of detours, lots of wandering a bit for myself. But, when we are faithless, God is still faithful. And so, but I think one of the critical questions, I suppose, that you have to ask yourself is the same one that was asked of Job. When Satan talked about Job and said to God, look, does Job serve you for nothing? And I think we sometimes make God into a slot machine. That if we put our money in, sometimes literally putting the money in, but sometimes just praying or faith or, trying to live a good life, even though we all fail along the way, we somehow think that he owes us. Well, what I've realised is he doesn't owe us anything. And that's what Job realised, of course. And the temptation that Job was faced with is the same one that everyone is faced with in these kinds of moments is, will I curse God and die? Or will I still worship him? And for me, yes, I put together a playlist of some worship songs, and you're very welcome if you look onto Spotify, or indeed I think Apple Music. I put some of those together. I think I call them Hope Gospel Music, and it's not really gospel music, it's worship music, but hope in the gospel. And I found some of those songs, and a few of them particularly, to be incredibly impactful. I was just listening to a couple of new songs yesterday that really blessed me and really challenged me, that actually he is here. He is in us. He is around us. He's looking after us. And when that's the case, we kind of don't need to fear. We will sometimes be afraid, but he does say, cast our fears on him because he cares for you. So, the question was the same question as of that of Job. Do I worship God because he keeps me comfortable? And is my hope in God for the now? I mean, if the now is all your hope is in, if your hope in the now doesn't look very hopeful because you're feeling ill or you're feeling exhausted, or you can't get up in the mornings, you find it hard to face the day, and that would still be true for me. If your hope in the here and now doesn't look good, or if things are tough, things are difficult relationships, difficult problems going on, then if that's all your hope is, then I think it's Paul who says we would have no, we're to be pitied more than anyone. And so, our hope isn't just in that. Our hope is in an eternal future. And yet our hope is that the God who's promised us this eternal future will also keep delivering us. And sometimes that's not with a miraculous healing. Obviously I'm still praying for that, and I appreciate prayers for that. But it seems like God has chosen a more sort of gentle approach to my healing, an approach that's entirely backed up by what the medics were predicting, although it's at the better end of what the medics were predicting, if that makes sense, because there were certain markers that suggested chemo wouldn't be good in my case, and yet it was. And so that's really, really good. And yet they've also told me, this week I go back, I will have to have a blood test. It's highly unlikely that the blood will have changed it's only about a month since the last one. But at some point, it's possible that the blood test might change, or that the nodes might come back. And so there's that uncertainty. And those of you that heard of Matt Chandler's situation a few years ago might remember he talked about having an axe hanging over his head in that situation. But I remember him saying, look, the only difference between me and you is that I know it. And so when we look at our own frailty in the eye, and when we, have many of our natural hopes, if you like, dashed, like work and other things like that, money, other things, the real question is, do we hope in God just for that? Or do we going to choose to worship him even when things are tough? And do we hope in him for an eternal future? And if we believe that he's going to bless us with an eternal future, do we dare to believe that actually even now, in the here and now, he is turning all things around for good, even those small things like I was just talking about, looking for evidences of grace, looking for evidences that God's in control. So in my case, the money is a pretty big one, as you can imagine. And the fact that God has spared me. And, the fact that if I'm still here, just perhaps he hasn't finished with me yet. I don't believe so. So my goal is to start writing again. I'm going to try and use the little bit of energy that I have to do a little bit of writing. I might even try and do a blog post every day if I can manage it. I don't know whether I'll manage that or not, but I'm going to try. So if you want to sort of get involved, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love you to join me again in reading the blog. You can just Google my name and find the site over there. But more than that, I'd love you to pray for me. And really, it's about recovery. And so, I'm praying for spiritual recovery. You don't have something like this happen to you without it affecting you spiritually. And one of the things Tim Keller talks about is that people who face suffering, either themselves or in other people that they love, really have two choices, and it is a choice. It will either drive you towards God or it will drive you away from God. I've recently been reading a couple of situations about Christian leaders who have faced challenges and have faced difficulties in their life, and some of these people who I greatly admire and who we've all benefited from, and yet because of the challenges they face, they've drifted away. And they've actually said they no longer believe in Christianity. They no longer believe in God. They just can't cope. It's people ask the question: how can this world with all its suffering, be okay? I mean, how is that consistent with there being a good God? And I think that is a genuine question that people ask. And when you're wrestling with that question, You can't just treat it lightly. It's not just a merely theological question, it's a heart question, because it goes to the very nature of God. How can God allow these things to happen? And of course, I don't want to be twee about it, but at the end of the day, if you don't believe in a God, there is no hope whatsoever. All that atheism does, it doesn't solve this problem of pain. It just takes the hope away, and it leaves us without any hope. So for me, although my faith has faced some challenges because of it, and I remember meeting someone, actually, it's quite interesting. I met an atheist cancer sufferer who'd had a much worse time than me in many ways, and my heart went out to them, and we were talking. And we got talking about faith, matters of faith, and they said something interesting to me, because as Christians, I think we often just superficially assume that as Christians it's going to be easier for us to face these hardship. And I think perhaps if we were a bit better prepared for it, if we had allowed ourselves to be taught by it, and I would strongly recommend Tim Keller's book for that, because even if you've never experienced significant suffering in your life, it's coming. At some point, it's coming. You can't live for 60 years on planet Earth without experiencing significant suffering of some form or other. So it's coming towards you, so you may as well prepare for it. And I don't think I was perhaps as prepared as I should be, although I thought I was, because we understand the truths. I knew Romans 8:28, all things work together for good for those who love God, and I knew I loved God, and yet still it's a challenge when these things really hit us. And so, just to say, and I'm rambling a little bit now, I shall draw this to an end, but just to say that, spiritually these things can be a blow. Mentally, as I say, my mind isn't working quite as well as it should be, and that's partly because of the chemo, but it's also partly because of the fatigue that this disease brings. And believe you me, it's not just like being tired, it's like wading through treacle. I mean, the best way I can describe it actually is how you feel when you've got the flu. You just don't want to get out of bed. I mean, you can, if you really force yourself, if a smoke alarm went off and you thought the house was on fire, you'd get out of your sick bed and you'd go out the door. But for many of us, when we're struggling with these kind of things, that's how it is every day. But we keep going, and we do our best, and we take whatever we can. But there's a lot of physical aspects to that as well. There's very limited ability to walk still. I can walk, and praise God, I'm now able to walk short distances without the stick for longer distances. Yeah, now I've just had a couple of jumps there in the network, so maybe that's a clue that it should be time. Yeah, Tim Keller's book. So the book I'm talking about is called Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering, and I would strongly recommend that book. Can't recommend that book enough. So if you are struggling right now with a difficulty, you might feel like God is a long way away. You might feel even that doubts are gripping your mind. You might even wonder, does God even exist? Does God love me? Have I done something wrong? And if that's where you are right now, I pray that God will meet with you. I pray that God will speak to you. I would encourage you, read the Bible, even if it feels dry, even if you can only manage a verse or two. Read John's Gospel particularly. I found great help in reading that. Study the Gospel. So for me, I read my own book again, Hope Reborn, that I wrote with Toppy, my pastor. Getting the Gospel right, getting back my gratitude to God for what he's done for me when I'm feeling sorry for myself, when it's actually God has given me the greatest gift ever in his son, that by providing for me all of those gospel truths which you can sort of lose sight of in the middle of great suffering. And actually, is it great suffering? I mean, that's the other thing. See, when you think about the gospel, you realise what Jesus went through for us, and most of us don't really experience anything like the sort of level of severe pain that he went through, and the trauma that he went through, and the suffering that he went through. It makes my little battle look tiny, really. So I've been waffling long enough. I thank you all for watching, and I would like to thank you for praying, and thank you, God, for being with me all of these months. Years actually, for helping me and my family, even though it's been challenging, very challenging, and it's my Ebenezer, and I'm praying that this last quarter of the year I'll get stronger. And if you're struggling yourself, or if you're in recovery yourself, or if you've got some kind of health issue, I pray for you that God will be close to you at this time, that you'll know the comfort that God gives, so that you can comfort others with the comfort that he's given, and that you'll have the have the oomph, if you like, to keep fighting at those times when it feels hopeless, that hope would be born into your life. I love what Jesus said, or it says of Jesus, that he won't break a bruised reed, and he won't snuff out a smouldering wick or a candle. And I don't know about you or but I don't know about you, but there have been many times where it's my faith itself has felt like just a little smouldering candle, or where I as an individual has felt like a bruised bit of grass. You know, when you break something and it looks like it's gonna smash, and that's the end of it. But God has been there. He doesn't break us. He restores us. And so I'm grateful to God, as I keep saying, and I pray for you that God will lift you up. There's a verse that I clung on to, and I still cling on to, which says that after you've suffered a little while, and we have to remember that a little while in God's perspective can be a lot longer than in ours sometimes, but after you've suffered a little while, he will himself restore, strengthen, establish you. And I think I've forgotten one of them. So yeah, that's my prayer for you. And if there's anything I can pray for you specifically, please put it into the comments. And if you want to chat through something that you're struggling with, find someone that you know that you can trust, and open up to them about how you're feeling. And if you don't have somebody like that, then I'd be only too happy to try and have a little chat with you if that would be helpful. All right, well, God bless you all, and thank you to everyone who's prayed. Thank you to everyone who's encouraged me. Thank you to everyone who's seen me at my worst. You know, you're only going to see me at my best in a moment like this. I'm not going to put the camera in my face when I'm bawling my eyes out at the middle of the night, which has happened, or when I'm in pain, or all of those situations. But yes, so far the Lord has helped me, my Ebenezer, and 2019. Still a quarter of it left, I think, is it? September, October, November, December. Yeah, about a quarter of it left. A third of it left, almost. A third to a quarter of it left. Let's pray that God continues to bless and move and heal and restore and mould us. I mean, there was a song this morning at church, actually. It said, if you are being pressed, if you are feeling crushed, if you are struggling, then it means God is making new wine. And I pray for that, for me and for you, that new wine will come to you out of all the suffering and all the difficulty that you may be facing. Well, bless you. Goodbye, everyone. If you want to pop over to my blog and see some of the things I have been writing, you might not realise that I've been doing a little bit of blogging, not very much over the last few months, but there's obviously quite a big back catalogue from all the years before. You're very welcome. If you want to read a book, strongly recommend Tim Keller's book, Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. But I'd also recommend getting your head around the gospel again, and whether that's through reading a book like Hope Reborn, or whether that's through just reading John's gospel. It's been a beautiful thing, and I'm still doing that. I'm trying to study that. I'm trying to get my head around that, and just encountering Jesus again through that, and through prayer and through worship. At times you don't have the energy to do it. At times it's hard. At times you feel like he's distant, but it's certainly worth it. Well, bless you all. Thanks a lot. God bless. Bye-bye.